the Republic of Zambia into Zambia Limited, in which event and process he was the entire stockholder and reduced all of us to miserable, disinterested spectators. KK was not amused. He stormed out of the meeting. That's how I went to my office to write a resignation.
You knew you were not going to stay.
Huh?
Was he going to pardon you then?
Well, actually, he did. He did. Surprisingly, all my colleagues, the ministers, were very surprised that KK offered me a farewell lunch. The only lunch is offered to an outgoing minister. And they said, but what are all these funny things? You say something unpalatable, he walks out of the meeting, and the next time he's giving a farewell lunch. And I said to my ministerial colleagues, I said, you have not understood the psychology of issues. People are friends with their equals, not with their sycophants and slaves.
So the cabinet, I must assume, was very democratic at that point.
Well, you know, cabinet, talking of cabinet democracy, I think is a far-fetched thing because the cabinet is just advisory. So the quorum of cabinet is just the president. So, well, you are allowed leeway to discuss things quite freely.
And offer dissent like you did in a very aggressive manner. 38 years later, you came back to manage an economy now that looked fairly mismanaged, facing a lot of challenges, ravaged, and poverty levels gone up, country not knowing probably whether it was going or coming back. 2011, you became finance minister.
Mr. Sata asked me if I could assist at the Ministry of Finance. I was not overzealous about it because I was already old enough to stay away from the business of government. But
you were coming out of retirement.
Yeah. But Mr. Sata asked me to help with at the Ministry of Finance, and I did. There were challenges. And you see, Zambia, we've not really grown the economy. A statistic which has been used by many people is the one that relates to the GDP of Zambia and Ghana, which in 1964 was at $3.5 billion. And that was the level of Korea's GDP. Now, Korea's GDP is $1.4 trillion. And we, Ghana and Zambia, we're the officials here use 27% of $27.5 billion as GDP. It's much, maybe the GDP is about 3 times that level. But even if we upgrade our GDP to 70 billion, it's still far away from the 1.4 trillion GDP of Korea. So Zambia, just like the rest of Africa, we have marked time. Our economies have not grown. There must be something that we are doing fundamentally wrong, because we have this immensity of resources. If you take Zambia, compare it with South Korea. South Korea is about 90,000 square kilometers, and we are 752,000 square kilometers, and we have an immensity of resources.
Not achieving anything.
South Korea,
Zambia's potential remains a song, basically.
Apart from cement, I don't think of any other natural resource that Korea has, which proves to you that, you know, what matters in this scheme of things, not the natural resources. The biggest resource and most important and significant resource any country has is people. People who are developed to the maximum of their potentialities and who can perform.
We have wrong human resource.
No, we have done well now on human resources because at independence we've only at the end people were university graduates. Now we're in thousands. So
and still not achieving anything. There must be something wrong, like you say.
Yeah, well,
thousands of graduates, nothing
yes,
showing
the
for
way
that.
The way we proceeded about it, things, you know, our decisions are emotion and sentiment driven. The consequence is that the rationality content is suspect, not to say zero. But you know, in the 7 years of PF administration, we have done more than has been done in other administrations. Because even now, when the financial situation is not the most glamorous, there's still a lot of development projects going on in the country. So at least PF has got a track record, but we can do better by thinking more deeply on the issues. Take things like agriculture. Our thinking on agriculture is very sloppy. It's all maize.
Now, you've spoken about PF achieving more and the growth and development, but this is being challenged, that it has come at a huge cost of debt.
No, you
almost
know,
taking us back to pre-HIPIC days.
Yeah, you see, the pre-HIPIC debt was different. Our external debt pre-HIPIC was $7 billion US, and our GDP was $6 billion. Of course, the GDP of African countries is always underestimated because our economies in Africa are mainly in the informal sector. The informal sector is 2-3 times bigger than the formal sector. So that's the reality. 6 billion GDP and 7 billion in external debt. So it's a different situation. It's not the same. And that time, our budget was underpinned by external aid. I think especially the capital component of the budget, it was all funded through external subventions. Now at least the contribution of external assistance to our budget is very insignificant. It's perhaps falling even below 1%.
Now, you were a finance minister when all this debt was accumulated, and I want to pick your thinking around that.
Yes, we have accumulated. We have something like.
What was the justification
just for
borrowing and borrowing and borrowing until maybe now the country looks like it cannot borrow anymore?
Yeah, but we borrowed not for recurrent expenditure. We borrowed for the capital programs. Without the borrowing, some of the infrastructure that is taken place would not have taken place. But of course, borrowing externally has severe implications in terms of the capacity to service the borrowed money. So now our external debt stands at 8.7 billion. But I think that if we are to be honest, there are also pipeline items. So maybe by the time we go into next year, our external debt could rise to as much as 13 billion, at which point debt servicing will become quite critical, because now, this year, I think we'll spend between $500 and $600 million to servicing the external debt. And but next year it will jump to above 1 billion. So that's quite a challenge. But give the government
not prudent at all. Was that prudent?
Well, it's prudent. The fact that
when you reach a level where you
have borrowed in order to
defaulting.
reinforce economic development by building infrastructure. Development has to be premised on sustainable infrastructure. If there is no infrastructure, you can't develop. But you have to. It's going to be a challenge to service the external debt.
Did we have to go that route to a point where
yes,
we're reaching a point where we're almost breaking, failing to pay back, risk of defaulting?
No, we have not defaulted, and that's
a risk.
That's a credit to Zambia. So for those debts which relate to the Euro bonds, at the time of maturity, Zambian government will have an option to roll over the debts, because you see the people who have invested in these Euro bonds are long-term pension and insurance funds. 60% of the investors in our Euro bonds are Americans and Canadians. And if you look at the 10-year bond yields in the USA and Canada, in the US now it's moving close to 3%. In Canada, still around 2.5%. But the investors are happy to get 8% by investment in our bonds. So if it comes to the repayment period and you propose a rollover, they will be very, very happy.
You push over the debt to
the
future generation to deal with.
Yeah, there are the other debts which I think government will simply have to negotiate, like the ones from our Chinese friends, and undertaking some projects at exceedingly inflated costs. So that gives us a moral point for us to start with, to negotiate with the Chinese government if these loans repayment period can be lengthened and the interest factor toned down. And I do feel that it is a sustainable suggestion, because the Chinese put a lot of premium on friendship, and Zambia is one of the most friendly countries to China, and I think they can assist us in that regard.
Was this debt planned?
Well, so
there's still a view that when PF came into power and you thought of a district, woke up in the morning, declared it, and you were there getting money to pump in there to build. It's not justified, like yes, the people needed development, but then it looked so unplanned.
So no, yeah, so unplanned, so unanticipated. But you know, you are planning the development of the country. You are building the schools, you are building the hospital, you are building the roads, which are very expensive items. Those are not toys, and so your internal resources are not adequate to sustain these projects. So you go out and borrow, and you know the other issue about the debt is just the way we use a very low base GDP. The official GDP that is being used at 27% understates the GDP of Zambia. I have here this document, the World Bank Development, it's called World Development Indicators. On page 28, you get the GDP of Zambia. The World Bank GDP for all the countries, they use two routes. One is called the Atlas route. Atlas route means the dollar market price. And the other one is the purchasing power parity, which means use comparative prices. The simple example is that the price of lager in Zambia is 60 cents. The price of lager in US may be $3. So on that basis, there's a differentiation in the computation of the GDP based on the purchasing power parity. This document is 2015. The index here is 2013. And the GDP of Zambia, in this World Bank Development Indicators for 2015 is given as 55 billion purchasing power parity. So I think that maybe, in my view, it's not an informed view. The GDP of Zambia should lie between 60 and 70 billion. But
so we need to push that agenda. Eh? Push that agenda?
Well, you know, when I was that, we talked about it, but you know, the commitment levels in Zambia have sunk very low.
Among technocrats?
Yeah, technocrats, yeah, politicians, but basically the technocrats, they're not interested in those things. They're more interested in their benefits. The guys in the Central Statistics Office will be more concerned about upgrading their benefits than computing
upgrading the GDP
of Zambia. But I see if we can do it.
So if people don't see that importance, it's probably a sign that they've given up on the leadership.
No, they're not giving up.
It's
just that, you know, the civil service collapsed. The commitment levels are just zero. And so that's one of the challenges, you know. That's one of the challenges. And yet the civil service eats up 54% of the budget. And that is just the monument, straightforward monument. But if you factor in the fact that even in the capital program, there is a component of monuments, and then the support to the institutions, which grant-aided institutions, the monument and monument-related factors could eat up as much as 60% of our budget. But, you know, we are not getting any return on our investment. And GRZ, we've upgraded the earnings in the civil service to levels which are far higher than the private sector. In government, the lowest paid person worker is at $3,500.
Listening to you, it doesn't give so much hope, because I think we've been this route before. Government did restructure and try to get the numbers low and try to replan the civil service. We're back to where we started. The civil
No,
service
but,
still gobbling up a lot of money, more than half of the budget.
Yeah, we can't reduce the civil service because, one, it will affect service delivery. And two, you will just increase the levels of unemployment. No, the economy is not growing high enough to generate higher levels of employment and to have an impact on poverty reduction, let alone poverty eradication. Our growth rates now are at 4%. If you discount for population growth, which is at 2.8%, our growth rate is only 1.2%, not enough to impact on poverty reduction and not enough to send the economy in an upward spin.
So we've not, this is one area I think governments, successive governments have not concentrated on. We've concentrated on everything else other than this, meaning we've never achieved a double-digit growth in the country.
We are trying.
53, 54 years down the line, not double-digit, and we still think we're growing. We still think we're developing.
The PF has tried and to raise the economy to a higher level, but still there is considerable room for improvement. And this is why I would hope that, when say, political parties meet in the so-called dialogue, I hope that it's not for political parties to just upgrade their chances of electoral or prospects. Like to talk about the countries that affect our country, like the low levels of development, the poor work culture of our country. At the end of the day, Zulu, we can be demagogues and so on, but the reality is that there is no country in the world, no government, which has resources other than what its people generate. So we've got to get our people in meaningful production. And basically, realistically speaking, it's only the agricultural sector which can deliver. But the agricultural sector in Zambia is just maize. And we've never gone beyond that thinking. And also our policies in that sector are emotion and sentiment driven. And so we can do a bit of rethinking.
PF did promise a lot in terms of agriculture, even diversification. And everybody has promised that. But we're still not getting the right thing when we talk about
you suppose Zambia with a culture, Zambians, you and I, and all the rest of our Zambians, with a culture of constantly, eternally embellishing slogans and glamorizing slogans. And we don't really come to grips with reality.
What can we do? We're looking at agriculture. What can we do? You've been minister. You had those fancy ideas you spoke to us about. Like 1980, 1978, 79. You sat in that office of Minister of Agriculture. Something you thought could be done, that can be done now?
There are many things. We don't want to talk about our individual things. We talk about our country. As for me, as an individual, for instance, we have a dairy farm in Chikwanda. It's the second largest dairy farm after Zambia. We're putting in a lot of investment in excess of 100 million kwacha. We were struggling milk production, 5,000-6,000. Now we are talking of dairy milk production of 16,000 liters. And we're not happy with that. We think that by the end of the year we will hit something like 20,000 liters per day. That's just one. But
in terms of policy, where should we be going?
Well, again, policy must only formulated there's a lot of sentiment there. But the reality, like for instance, improvement in the livestock. You will not improve your livestock in Zambia unless you can fuse in arrangements like artificial insemination. Now, if you want to use artificial insemination, small-scale farmers, they cannot store semen because there is no electricity in their places. Semen is stored at a low temperature of minus 190 degrees Celsius. So, but what we do, we should construct centers in the areas, especially where you have a lot of cattle, like the southern province and the western province. Construct centers where you can, which are electrified, where you can store semen, and then you go around the villages helping with artificial insemination to improve the breeds. But the way we go about it, take Botswana. Botswana, before the diamonds, their major exports were beef. Even up to now, beef is a very substantial proportion of the Botswana exports. And we are not in that category. And we have very good land, more arable land, with more grazing facilities than Botswana. So I think, generally speaking, as Zambians, we don't think deep. And now we can see some people in the public sector indulging in gimmicks and theatrics, which may be amusing, but which don't impact on enhancing the levels of development in our country. So all of us will have to think very hard how we develop.
The nation is to blame other than the leadership.
Well, the leadership must take the blame. You know. As leaders, we can't escape the blame. We have to do the right things. We have to think rightly. But you know, the public also everybody has to blame. They don't bring up ideas. Some of the guys in the opposition party, with very highly educated, with deep levels of intellect, what do? They don't bring out any ideas that can help Zambia go forward. They just sort of screaming obscenities at the ruling party and a trail of accusations of corruption, even though these characters want to lead crusades for corruption are themselves the high priests of corruption. And so but as a country, let's stop think deeply. Even our churches, they should not just stand bandwagon where people talk abstract politics, things which don't relate to the development of our country. The issue here, the challenge we've got, how do you reduce the poverty levels in our country, which stand at over 50%?
So you were there before independence. You are here now.
Yes.
And I want to ask you one question. I want to take you back a bit. 1959. I know that what we've read and heard is that the protest at Monali, in which you were expelled, was over a letter written by a Zambian who sort of praised the Federation and said civilization was being brought by the whites. And he said, why not ask for more whites into the country so we could have more civilization? He was almost right. Aren't we asking for more aid, more support, more FDI from the same people we wanted to chase?
Well, no, our protest was broader than that. We are protesting against some tenets of colonialism. So we took a harsh view of those students who are seen to be advocates of colonialism, which we are trying to militate against, you know. But the solution is not to bring whites. Take the example of Southeast Asian countries, which have developed more than the African countries. They were they did not even borrow like we African countries are doing. Okay, they did not get the subventions, no external assistance from the ferry gods called the donors. But they did the right things and they've got their economies in top gear. I'll give you the example of Thailand. Thailand made a fortune by exporting things like cassava. At peak, Thailand was exporting up to 5 million tons of cassava to the European Union. And you know, the other Southeast Asian countries, they went into electronics and they have made a lot of exports from electronics. Here you have Korea, Samsung and so on, because they put a lot of effort into education, and education in the right places. They put a lot of emphasis in areas like development of science and mathematics and electronics. So really, we don't have to bring back the Europeans. We can do it ourselves. We are already doing it. Our dependency on the external support is reduced even in terms of manpower. We have enough manpower. We even have surplus manpower which we export to countries. Like the UK, there's something like 2,000 nurses from Zambia serving in the UK. In the neighboring countries like Botswana, the educational system is largely sustained in both secondary and tertiary levels sustained by an influx of
Zambian teachers, and they're slowly moving away from that.
Some of your best mathematics teachers are teaching in Botswana, secondary schools.
Now, in your honest opinion, do you think Zambians are better off with the PF now than they were before?
Yes, they are better off with the PF because it's the PF transformative.
Look at poverty levels.
Agenda. No, the poverty levels are reducing. The poverty levels are reducing very marginally. The cost of living is a challenge. We have to, but how do you can't just, a PF will not wave a magic wand like any other party can't wave a magic wand and abolish the poverty, abolish poverty or raise production. We just, it's a long-term process, but PF has tried, and it's on that basis that PF will go to the country and ask for renewal in its mandate, and they'll be just fine. Because so many development projects have taken place since the inception of the PF administration, and we talked about the external borrowing. The external borrowing has mainly been to sustain our development endeavors.
Is it possible to sustain a pro-poor agenda in an environment like ours? Because government then needs to take very harsh decisions.
No,
what you can talk about is safety nets.
No, but harsh decisions, you must be careful. Like, for instance, even in rigorous taxation arrangements, it can impoverish people. It can send us backwards. I was educated in a country, Sweden, which had the highest taxation levels, but they've now
the most efficient system.
Yeah, most efficient, but now they've reduced the taxation levels to the lowest, and they are doing quite well. And sometimes you can achieve better results even by using taxation. I'll give you the example of Zambia breweries. 4 years ago, the excise duty on beer was 65%, which personally I thought was ridiculous. So we reduced it to 40%. Some of the officers in the appropriate departments didn't think we are doing the right thing. They think the minister was hoping mad. But what happened? When you reduced the excise duty to 40%, Zambia brewers now deliver more revenue to government than they did at 65%. And as an incentive, they've even gone into things like putting up a moat in the Lusaka South Mount Facility Zone. The moat there, which they used to import malt from Europe. Now they are self-sufficient, and the barley, which is the stuff used in the production of malt, is grown by small-scale farmers, 12,000. So they're giving employment to small-scale farmers, and they've gone into cassava production in the Luapula province. They have 4,000 people growing cassava. Now I understand they are going to push the numbers to 5,000 because they are producing some of the beer from cassava. And the volumes of beer producing from cassava, eco beer, is now equal to the volumes of most production. So, sometimes the taxation put in the correct proportions can be an encouragement to production.
The government's message is that things are changing, things are improving. There's a counter message that probably things are worse off and there's need for regime change.
There's no need for change. We just need to do better. Even ourselves in the PF, we should not sit on our laurels and say everything. There's room for improvement. We can improve even our policy frame. We can improve on the intellectual inputs into our thinking. Because sometimes your plans may be based on abstractions in which places we don't get. But basically, the challenge we have Zambian, the lower levels of work culture, work ethic. I don't know about your place. I can give you compliments because I think the agriculture say in Chikwanda is very strong. People really they work hard. But in where I come from, some people started drinking at 10 hours. And I said so at a meeting in Kasama one May day. I don't remember which year it was. I mean, 2013, I think I'd been sent to Kasama. And I was saying to to my people there. I come from there. I said, look, you guys look at our cousins, the other side of
This guy feeding the nation.
Well, they contribute, but even in the northern province, sometimes it produces very large amounts of maize which contribute to the nation. But we can do better. We have a lot of land. Northern province before Muchinga was hyped off was 20,000 square kilometers bigger than Malawi. So we have land, and most of the water, most of the lakes in our country in that area. So we have
very low production. Now, I want to take you to politics, from economics with politics. I know that in the recent by-elections, the ward by-elections, PF got 13 out of 16, and people are thinking, do Zambians live on a different planet than politicians? There's a message of complaint on the other side that you are not delivering, but then scoring in the political arena. Something you did.
We are not delivering. That's some of the elite who specialize in abstract criticism for itself. Well, as a country, PF is just entrusted with money to run the country, but it's the responsibility of all of us Zambians to get our country forward. For Zambia to go forward, every Zambian has got to be an active agent of the development. So, but PF has delivered in the 7 years now of our administration. We've delivered more development than has happened in the other administrations, in which I served myself. So I think that we have a moral right to go to the country to say, please, we have so many faults, there are so many things we are not doing right, but give us a mandate, our transformative agenda. That's work.
Post-SATA era, you think the president has managed?
Yes, yes, Lungu has managed. He has held the party together. In the PF, I sit in the central committee of the party. There are no factions. So we are right in putting Lungu at the helm after the demise of our hero, Mike Sata. So,
now, you wrote a very interesting letter, January this year. It was a sober reflection and maybe lamentations, I would call it, at profound, expressing profound regret at what you termed, now that the country's morals had really sunk very low.
Yeah, well, you see, Zambia is becoming an increasingly intellectual moral vacuum. So all of us have got that. We have to address that challenge. The commitment levels are. And one way we want to, people talk about corruption and so on. One way of abolishing the corruption is to deinstitutionalize the corruption. Some of our institutions, like for instance our electoral system, it's predicated, anchored on corruption. Parliamentary candidates, presidential candidates, they've got to find lots of money to bribe them. That's a wrong system. I think that we go maybe try another system. As Mr. Sata hinted in a speech which he was not allowed to deliver, on proportional representation, it distributes better. And look at the cost of by-election. The money that will go in Chilanga, and now Chilanga again will go back, the entire constituency of Chilanga will have to elect their chairperson. And in Lusaka, all the constituencies in Lusaka, all of us voters will have to vote for a mayor. Look at the cost simplicity in these by-elections, which you will not have if you had proportional representation.
But it's your party, I think, that defeated that clause in the Constitution.
No, we found it there. We have, but our party, I can tell you that our party is reflecting.
You had the power, and you still have as a party. You've got majority. You could push proportional representation into parliament.
Yes, our party is reflecting on that. And that's why some of us have said that, one of the mistakes we make in the Constitution are making, we proceed with indecent haste. We went in January 2016, approve a constitution with so many deficiencies, even setting up monstrosities like the Constitutional Court.
Does that show how weak our political system is, how weak our parliament is?
Yeah, but PF, we do introspection.
You should be guilty as a ruling party to pass such a constitution.
No, but
the bulk is on you.
Yeah, we accept, and we accept. I think we will remedy the situation. That's why some of us think that we should not go to Parliament rushing amendments at a breakneck speed with indecent haste, as it were, because we voted 3 years in our mandate. We cannot we can attempt to come up with a constitution which stands the test of time. Not constitutions which are made with individuals like 1996, when we had that amendment just to exclude the President Kaunda from standing. I was the Chief of Staff to President Chikwanda. I asked him, please, let's not proceed with this arrangement. But, somehow...
He didn't listen to you?
Well, he almost listened, but then they became another faction from our area. And they told President Chiluba, no, you are listening too much to Kaundists, to Unipists. So Chiluba changed his mind. And that's silly.
To MMDists. Now, I want you to, you've touched on a very sensitive issue, and I mean, touchy issue that you did, even that time, that President Sata was not allowed to read a speech to Parliament. You were Chief of Staff at some point, and this seems to suggest
I was not the Chief of Staff.
No, at some point.
And I was President Chiluba's Chief of Staff.
Yes.
January 1992 to 30th June 1997, I resigned because I think we started reading different notes with the President.
Now, I want to ask you, you served at one point under Chiluba as Chief of Staff. Then, in President Sata's regime, you seem to suggest he was not allowed to read a speech. It seems to suggest a captive president. Is that possible? Do you think that, how possible is that?
Yes, it is possible, because Mr. Sata, I had a copy because myself, he asked me to look at it, and so he asked me to keep this copy, which I produced. I didn't manufacture a copy. In that speech, which he didn't, well, they substituted it with that Baok speech, which he didn't, which he didn't read, because he realized that's not what he wanted to do. And so it's that, unfortunately, he just started making off-tangent jokes.
And there was no repercussion for the person that changed this?
Well, Mr. Sata have a time for all those things, because a month or so thereafter he died.
So you are suggesting it's possible for people to invade the presidency?
The presidency is a very vulnerable institution.
Now let's look. I still want you to continue on the issue of your letter.
Which letter?
I mean your statement. Yeah. You spoke about corruption as well.
Yes, there is, but we
accuse the people speaking about corruption as being themselves high priests.
Yes, they are.
Of corruption.
They are. I've served in government, but I don't want to go into the individuals. But I don't think that all the people throwing stones are really right. They live in glass houses, and I think they should be restrained in throwing stones. Corruption, we can fight it as a society. There'll be change. We have to change the moral dispositions of our country, and to make people realize that there is meaning to life beyond the senseless accumulations, beyond material trappings.
You're calling PF to introspect.
Yes, we have to do introspection. When people talk about the corruption, it's just to dismiss them. The people who are talking about corruption, we just dismiss them casually like that. We have to think.
Do you think government has done enough?
No, government is a very complex thing.
Has it done enough to fight
corruption? It's not like a company. One person is chief executive of the company and so on. Government is very complex. But, it is doing, but, we could do more. We could do more. Gradually, it's a gradual process. You have to transform the way people think. And we have to rearrange, the institutions. We have to be a bit strict, and, the governmental level. But, people just, when they say corruption, they look at ministers and so on. The corruption is most intense at the civil service level. And yet people they think that even ministers, they say there's a ministers, government system, it's difficult for ministers to extract money illegally from the government coffers there. The government expenditure is very well controlled. And now you see the other thing. The other thing is that the Auditor General reports are very sensational. A lot of work has been done in reinforcing the department, the division of the Accountant General, and the President, in his wisdom, has upgraded that office now to permanent secretary level, which means also upgrading the people below the Accountant General. So it's done the same. to the very critical office, which people did not even notice, and which you may not even be aware of its efficacy. The Office of the Controller of Internal Audit, and the President has also, in his wisdom, upgraded the Controller of Internal Audit to a permanent secretary level. A lot of systems are put in place to minimize the scams, the issues of stealing money. But you know, in Zambia, people like sensation. And so they would rather not hear about the glorious achievements of the officers of the Accountant General and the Controller of Internal. They would rather take the sensationalized reports of the Auditor General.
Now we have the Financial Intelligence Unit. Before the interview, we looked at Friday's edition of Diga, which was talking about 4.5 billion kwacha.
The Financial Intelligence Office.
That's your creation.
Yeah, partly. And partly, and they gave it support, and it can be useful. But again, there is an element of sensation, and the way money is reported out of the country, like through transfer pricing, this money relates to the mining industry. There are lots of exaggerations, the element of that. And government has in place a formula of taxation, the royalty tax route. Well, all they need, if they think that the prices of the metals in Zambia have gone up sufficiently high, they can just raise the marginal rate, and hopefully they will have the wisdom to raise it sufficiently and make it a final tax so that we don't get embroiled in fights with the mines and so on. The mines are the largest investor in our country. They account for 70% of the foreign exchange generated for the country. And so perhaps there is a better way of dealing with this than just picking up quarrels with them and so on. And for us in the party, we spend a lot of time trying to promote Zambia as a desirable investment destination. Our efforts can be bloated by people who want sensation, and they pick up fights with companies, with investors.
Are you pro-investors then?
Yes, I am, but we
not pro-Zambian.
No, no. That's you are putting it in a very
crude way.
No side, out of respect for us, you are putting it very differently. I'm pro-Zambian. We can have the rules. We define the rules, but we can restrict the malpractices of companies. But at the same time, we should also work hand in hand with the companies for common interest of getting Zambia forward. Employment generation.
Now, when we look at the Financial Intelligence Unit, the issues of structures and reporting structures that are coming up, you help create that.
The Economist Intelligence Unit, for instance, comes up with things which are outrageously sensational and quite untrue. So does issues like Africa Confidential. They come up with things like Africa Confidential. Zambia's external debt is 20 million. Absolutely ridiculous. But the way with Zambia, we should really think together. That's why I think that this dialogue should not just be about political scheming, a few theatrics, a few gimmicks. We need to think deeply. We have these problems for all of us Zambians. How do we live in a country where there's 50% of the people live in abject poverty? And if you look at Lusaka, all these mansions a number of us live in contrast to the poverty in the rural areas, which are still at a stone age as far as I'm concerned. Those are the problems we should be thinking about. How do we raise the intellectual input into our scheme of things? Because even our development plans are just a series of pipe dreams, fantasies, and so on. How do we give concrete reality to those things? So that's why we're going on the right direction. And if we are going to grow agriculture, why don't Zambians grow enough soybeans, which is very good price on the market, even sugar beans, even groundnuts? In the Eastern Province, they used to grow a lot of groundnuts. Now the production has gone down. And so those are the things we need to think. Why are people... because in agriculture, there are two issues. People may be paid too low a price so that they're not getting a fair recompense for their hard labor. The other thing is that the yields are very poor. How do we improve the yields? And how do we ensure that people grow things in the correct ecological zones? You can't push maize in Zambia north of Semukushi because the rainfall there is very high. The soils quite a dosage of acidity. The humus levels are down to 4. For a crop like maize, the minimum pH for maize to grow sustainably is about 5.5. So we need to think about these things seriously. And so because if we think that, the price, for instance, is just to go on raising the producer price of crops, basically maize, you get to a point where your maize is unaffordable to the consumer. Because there are two sides, there is the farmer and there is the consumer. And Zambia already is a very high-cost economy. And there are certain practices we find, hotels in Lusaka, for instance, they go to Zambia breweries and buy most at 5 kwacha, and they sell it at 20 kwacha in the hotel. 400% markup, So that's what makes Zambia a high-cost country. Why should tourists come in to Zambia, spend a lot of money to see the same elephants they can see in Botswana, Zimbabwe, and South Africa at a much lower cost? Why should they come to Zambia, pay twice in the hotel than they would pay in South Africa or Botswana and Zimbabwe?
Or Zimbabwe.
So Zambia should address real issues. There's so much politics, so much screaming obscenities at each other in the politics. But we all have some guilt, especially those of us Zambians who are gifted with an element of education. Is this all the thinking we can provide to our country? Can't we think better?
After studying a lot, sir, it's been a pleasure hosting you on the show.
Thank you.
You've been watching Sunday Interview, and my guest tonight was Mr. Alexander Bwalya Chikwanda, veteran politician, former Minister of Finance, Health, Local Government, and Chief of Staff at State House. Till next week sometime, pleasant viewing.
Is not a blanket, but she's always been there to comfort me. There is nothing I won't do to make this life